Hello and welcome back to another Marvel Rivals character guide. In this video, we'll be looking at our first tank on this series, actually, which is Magneto. We'll be going over his entire ability set and how to best use him in your matches. But before we get into it, if you enjoy this video or find it helpful in any way, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more. Now let's begin. Starting off, we have his primary fire, which is Iron Volley. When pressed, Magneto will fire a ball of iron that will explode on impact or when it hits its maximum range. The ball does 35 damage on a direct hit, with the explosion dealing 40 damage at max near the center of the explosion, with that dropping down to 20 damage at its edges. The magazine size is 10 rounds before you have to reload, and the max range of the projectile is 25 meters. Now, since this is a projectile, you'll have to lead your shots to land them, so try to anticipate your target's movements. And since the balls actually explode at their maximum distance, you can use that to hit multiple targets easier. Just sit at that 25 meter mark and use the projectile's explosion to hit several targets, and it makes hitting said targets a lot easier. His next ability, his right click, is Mag Cannon. When pressed, Magneto will fire a metal spear forward and deal damage to the opponent based on how many rings Magneto has. That's the arrows on your reticle. I know that they're called rings because they're the rings on his back, but they're represented on the UI as the arrows under his reticle. So I just call it a spear because, you know, the arrows. Anyways, at 1 arrow, the spear will deal 40 damage, with 2, it will deal 65 damage, and with 3, it will deal 90 damage and knock back the hit enemy 6 meters. It also has no cooldown, so you can choose to use it as long as it has at least 1 arrow fully charged. You get charged for these arrows slowly over time, or by blocking damage with his first defensive ability. I'm grouping both Metal Bulwark and Iron Bulwark together since practically they're the same ability. Both abilities, when pressed, will summon a protective bubble around the target. This bubble can soak up to 300 damage before breaking, or it will end after its max duration of 2.5 seconds. The only difference here is Metal Bulwark summons the bubble around the targeted teammate, protecting your ally, while Iron Bulwark summons the bubble around Magneto, letting you protect yourself. Because of this, Iron Bulwark has no range, since you're always in range of yourself, and Metal Bulwark has a maximum range of 20 meters, so your allies will have to be somewhat close for you to bubble them. Like I said earlier, it can soak up to 300 damage or end after 2.5 seconds, but one of the most important things to note is that for every 100 damage it soaks up, it will actually charge up one of the arrows for your Mag Cannon ability. So 1 full shield is 3 arrows for your Mag Cannon. And finally, the cooldown is 12 seconds, and both abilities share the same cooldown. You get 1 bubble, and you have to decide if you want to protect yourself or a teammate for the entire cooldown duration. His next defensive ability, his shift, is Metallic Curtain. When pressed, Magneto will hold a shield up in front of him until he ends the ability or the energy is fully drained. That curved bar to the right of your reticle is your shield charge. Magneto's shield is the inverse of Doctor Strange's. Where Strange can hold his shield up for an unlimited amount of time, but it can be broken, Magneto's shield can only be held up for a maximum of 2 seconds, but it can block an unlimited amount of damage at a time. His shield has a total of 100 energy. You spend 50 energy per second that the shield is held up, and the recharge is 11 energy per second. So to summarize all that math for you, 100 energy, 2 seconds max duration, and a little under 10 seconds for a full recharge on your shield. The ability also has a cooldown time of 3 seconds, so if you only use half of your shield but drop it to shoot or to do something else, you'll have to wait those 3 seconds before you can raise it up again. Then, before we get to his final ability, his ultimate, he has another side ability called Magnetic Descent. This basically just lets him slow fall like Namor, Scarlet Witch, and a bunch of other characters. So if you jump down from the high ground, you can actually slow your descent and, take a couple shots from the high ground if you want to. Alrighty, we're here at his ultimate, Meteor M, which is a bit more complex than it looks. When pressed, Magneto will fly into the air and summon a massive ball of collected metal, which he can charge for 10 seconds before being thrown at an enemy, where it will hit or land and explode in a giant radius. But there is a lot to note with this one. For starters, while charging the ability, there will be a 15-meter spell field around Magneto. If any projectiles or attacks are sent into this field, they will instead be grabbed and collected into the ball that Magneto is holding. If you look underneath your reticle, you can see a meter that will charge up as enemies fire projectiles or bullets into this field, with more projectiles being grabbed, resulting in more charge. Now here's where we get to the complicated stuff. The damage. The initial ball will deal 100 damage at the center of its explosion, dropping to 50% of the total at its edges. But this goes up as Magneto charges the ball, capping out at 300 damage when the ball is considered at full charge, which is after holding it for 4 seconds. Then, as your ball is collecting projectiles, you get an additional 3 damage per point of charge, which caps out at 100 charge. So after all that, just know that at minimum, if you just pop it and instantly let it go, you'll deal 100 damage at the explosion center, and at a maximum, if you fully charge it and you get a full 100 charge, you'll deal 600 damage. And the final thing I want to mention is that this ultimate can be overcharged. What I mean by this is that if you go over 100 charge, if they keep shooting projectiles into it after 100 charge, it can actually explode on itself, which means you don't get to throw it, and your ultimate is practically wasted. Now that we know what his abilities do, how can we best play him in our matches? This should be fun since I haven't actually gotten to talk about tanking yet on this channel. But anyways, before we get into the real tanking stuff, I want to go over his two main attacks, his primary fire Iron Volley and his right click Mag Cannon. Your primary fire is pretty straightforward. The only things I'll say is to be sure to pay attention and practice your aim. His projectile definitely isn't the fastest, and it does take some practice to get good at leading your targets and landing those direct hits, which you want to do. You'll be doing so much more damage with direct hits, so always go for them if you can. But this doesn't mean to forget that your primary fire does indeed have an explosion and AoE effect. You can really use this to your advantage to either hit multiple enemies while they're grouped up, or to be a bit cheeky and hit enemies around corners if they're hugging it to either retreat or to peek around and spy on your team. The final thing I'll say about your primary fire is remember that it does have a maximum range of 25 meters, so some characters are going to be able to get out of your reach pretty quickly once you get onto them, especially flying characters can just float away from you. Characters that, can just swing away from you. So do keep that in mind, that it does have a maximum range of 25 meters, so try to stay within that range. Then we have Mag Cannon, which is such a good and just versatile ability. For starters, it does good damage, with 90 being the max at full charge. This is a great way to open up a fight or to finish a fleeing enemy, since the spear does travel pretty quickly and has a deceptively large hitbox. You will definitely land some that you thought you might have missed, and like I said, it does travel pretty fast, so leading your targets is a bit easier. Then you have the 6-meter knockback that also applies to enemies at full charge. This is just great for stunning people out of ultra abilities, moving them out of position, and knocking enemies off the high ground, or even in some rare cases, off of the map. Displacement tools are always good. It's always good to put your enemy in a place they didn't plan on being in, because not only do you have the upper hand because, you put them there and you knew they were going to be there, so you can plan ahead, but also they have to dedicate time and resources to either getting back to a good position or to getting back to their team. But you're also forcing the enemy supports to react to what you're doing, and it's always good to have them on the back foot where you can take advantage if they say push too far ahead to save a teammate, or run off alone to save a teammate. So yeah, use your spear when it's at full charge for that high damage and knockback. Even if it's not at full charge, use it if it means you can secure a kill or hurt an enemy enough to get them to back off from either you or your team. Definitely don't always just save it for, full charge. Use it if it can secure a kill, but, definitely take note when it is at full charge and realize, you have the knockback and you had that quick 90 damage. Next, we have his defensive abilities, which I'm going to talk about individually first, then how I use them in conjunction to keep up as much constant time of protection on my team. Let's start with the bulwarks. Magneto is the masters of bubbles, so using your bubbles well is really going to help win games and raise your overall effectiveness. Plus, your divers and your supports will really appreciate it if you save their life with a well-timed bubble. But the big questions are, who do you bubble and when do you bubble? Your bubble is a 2.5 second or 300 damage shield. This is great and you can use it in so many ways. For starters, if you have anyone on your team that likes to dive, you can bubble them as they're going in to ensure their safety and to protect them for a few seconds so they can deal their damage. Or, on the other side, you can bubble them as they're retreating from the enemy backline and coming back to your team so you can ensure that they make it back safely. This works really well with your other tanks or DPS, like Psylocke, Iron Fist, and Magic. Seriously, it is so fun watching a Hulk bubble themselves, jump in, mess up the backline, and then you hit them with your bubble, and they either keep messing up the other team, or they make it back safely. Seriously, if you're running a tank duo with a Magneto, the Magneto should have your back. Of course, if you're all playing grouped up, try to bubble who you can that's low on health, so you can buy your support some time to heal the team back up and do what they do best. But honestly, if you're playing grouped up, you should be using the bubble on yourself most of the time. Of course, if someone is low and it means saving their life, bubble them. But as Magneto in these clumped up groups, I try to make myself as big as possible. What I mean by this is I will get to the front of my clumped up team if I'm not already, and then I will bubble myself and push in a little bit. Most people in these mosh pit fights are just going to shoot what's in front of them, and here they see this big purple boy running at their face. Now, this method is really effective if it's around a choke point or a hallway or some kind of confined area, where by just getting closer to the enemy team, you can take up more of their view, where they pretty much have to drop your bubble to actually get to the rest of your team. Then of course, if you're getting jumped and attacked, you should probably bubble yourself. If you die, no one gets any bubbles, and we're all sad. Not only because no bubble, but also no tank, which means no protection, and so on. So yeah, you should definitely be bubbling yourself if it means saving your own life when you need to. Finally, don't forget that for each 100 damage your bubble absorbs, it charges your mag cannon by 1 arrow. So try to weave the abilities the best you can. What I mean by this is use your mag cannon, bubble, take the damage, and then use your mag cannon again. By weaving these, you're charging your mag cannon faster overall and putting out more damage, since you're getting that crisp 90 damage of the 3-charge spear more often. Speaking of weaving abilities, we have his other defensive ability, Metallic Curtain. This is your go-to ability, and since it's a shield, it's pretty easy to use. Just stand in front of your team and block unlimited damage for 2 seconds. Now, since this only lasts for 2 seconds, you don't really have a lot of time where you can protect your team, and with the 10-second cooldown, it's gonna be a while before it's back up again. The main selling point or strength of Magneto's shield is its infinite durability. This makes it absolutely amazing for making those pushes on the point or retreating from an enemy push. You can raise your shield and rush forward, taking as much ground as possible, letting your team take the space behind you. This also forces the enemy to either back up and reposition or fight you in a close-range brawl fight, which can work out for you depending on your team comp. I will say those close-range brawl fights do work out for Magneto because his primary fire does have the explosion radius on it, so he's able to damage quite a few people at the same time and just, hit his targets pretty easily since they are in close range. You could also try to use it when you know big attacks are coming up. If you know a Punisher or Star-Lord ult is coming up, you can use your shield to get into their faces for a few seconds, blocking all of their damage, so you can give your team either enough time to kill them or get away. Sure, in these extreme cases, you might die, but you'll hopefully be making the sacrifice play, or in, the best case scenario, you buy your team enough time to just melt the target quickly. But yeah, definitely try to block ults with it, get in front of your team, try to take space, and play around it knowing that your shield will not drop due to damage, but only to its 2-second duration. The real thing to pay attention to is your shield's energy. It's only up for 2 seconds, but it's down for 10, so try to think ahead when you use your shield. In those 10 seconds before your shield is fully charged, can your team win this team fight? Can you make this pick? Will we need to retreat, or can we keep pushing? Answer those questions and react accordingly. If you can use your shield to push up and ensure a pick or several picks, it's probably a good time to use your shield. If you've lost someone already and the enemy team is pushing quickly, maybe try to reposition and use it later to either protect your team when the enemy team does commit to going all in, or to make a counter push if the odds end up tipping in your favor due to a good pick by your team or your supports making a good play, or, any number of factors that would tip the scales in your team's favor. I also want to say that when using his shield, you want to play around cover. I know that might sound a little weird since his shield does have infinite durability, but it does have a really short duration. That 2-second period does not give you enough time to retreat if a push fails or if something goes wrong and you need to unexpectedly back up or get into cover. So for that reason, try to play near walls and corners if you're unsure how a play is going to work out. You can quickly dart around the corner or behind a cover or a wall or whatever you need to. Basically, always be aware of your surroundings and where you can seek cover if you end up being in a situation where your shield wasn't enough. Now that we've covered both defensive abilities, try to alternate them in a way where you always have at least one form of protection up at any time. What I mean by this is use your shields when you really need to and don't waste them, because nothing is worse than the enemy team getting on you and both your shield and bubble are on cooldown. If one of your teammates is diving and in their backline, bubble them. This will not only protect and help them, but it will also, most of the time, draw attention to them, which means you probably don't need to use your shield right now. Or if you're in a choke point, you can get in front of your team and bubble yourself. The enemy team is really only going to be able to shoot at you since you're fighting in such a limited space, and since the bubble absorbs so much damage and has a decent duration, it gives your supports more than enough time to get onto you so you don't die after your bubble expires, or to heal your team. Your shield, unlike your bubble, on the other hand, is a different story. Since it has a duration of 2 seconds and a recharge time of 10, no matter what you do, there will always be downtime in between your defensive abilities. For that reason, I try to space mine out as much as possible so that when I push in with my shield, my bubble is either nearly back or back already. For example, you can use your shield to push on the point and grab some space, allowing your team to push up and fight the other team. If you time your shield ending with your bubble coming back up, you'll be able to either protect yourself right after, giving you a total of 4.5 seconds of protection, or you can bubble the most in-need teammate at that time. This still lets you play aggressively and push up, but still gives you the flexibility to protect anyone on your team afterwards. After this though is 7.5 seconds where you don't really have any way to help protect your team other than just moving around and trying to use your big model to take up space and get enemies to shoot at you. For this reason, I don't think Magneto is a super good solo tank. He can definitely solo tank for a reason I'll explain in just a second, but I think he is definitely more of a better off tank, where he has another tank and his healers to help him sustain through that 7.5 seconds while both defensive abilities are on cooldown. Like seriously, if you have some extra muscle on your team, like a Doctor Strange or a Hulk, and Magneto is able to support them and help them, it really makes Magneto insane. But like I said earlier, he definitely can be played as a solo tank. You just have to get better at recognizing when you need to be using your defensive abilities. What I mean by this is you need to recognize when the team fight is more on just a poking stage, when, you know, you're taking negligible damage that your healers can just easily heal, and when the enemy team is actually committing to something and you need to actually use your defensive cooldowns to save your team and protect them. So it just takes a little bit more game sense, I think, to play him as a solo tank. It definitely is a bit more difficult, and for that reason, I do think he is a better off tank. But yeah, if you're playing him solo tank, just get better at recognizing when you need to be using your defensive abilities, when the enemy team is committing, and when you're just taking poke damage that you can kind of just move around and let your healers heal. Then finally, we have his ultimate, which is fairly simple for how you use it, but complicated on when you use it. It's a big ball you throw that does a lot of damage. Try to use it to hit weakened opponents or combo with an ult like Groot that groups up everyone together so you can hit as many people as possible. Like I said, not really too complicated on how you use it. But when it comes to when to use it, it's a whole different story. Since your ult does more damage the more projectiles it absorbs, you actually want to use it before those big combos and big plays. You want to have enough time to get the 300 damage from the 4-second charge time, and you want to give your opponents enough time to shoot at you so that their projectiles can actually be absorbed by your ultimate and charge it up. The other problem though is actually charging up your ults, because most of the time you're going to be running into two main types of teams. Teams that will either just stop shooting at your ult so it hits like a wet napkin, or teams that fully commit to shooting so that they overload your ult and it's wasted. It sounds annoying, but there are a couple tricks you can do to make sure your ult gets a decent amount of charge and goes off each time. For starters, when Magneto activates his ult, he flies, so you can actually use this to your advantage to ult from unexpected spots. You know, you can take the high ground, you can come from a corner up top, you can just, use it from random spots that normally they wouldn't be looking for you at. You can also ult on or above people. If they're not expecting it, they're not going to see you above them for a few seconds, giving your ult time to charge, and they're going to keep shooting at your team or whatever they're shooting at, not noticing that the projectiles are actually being absorbed because you're above them. Basically, if you activate your ult on them, your 15-meter spell field that absorbs the projectiles will be covering them, so effectively the projectiles will be coming out of their weapons and into your ult, guaranteeing that it at least gets a little bit of a charge. The final tips I have for his ultimate is be wary of your surroundings. The ball is thrown from above and to the left of Magneto, so if you're in a cramped space or near a corner, it might get clipped on a piece of the environment and explode early, which is always a feels bad moment. Also, watch your ult charge meter very closely. If you're playing against a team that always overloads it, you might have enough time to panic throw it at 80 or 90. It going off at all is better than having the entire ult wasted, so if it's filling up super quickly, try to just throw it rather than it being overloaded so it can at least kinda get some value. Anyways, now that we know some general tips and strategies and know how to play him, who does he combo well with? Anyone that can dive or has high mobility and other tanks. Magneto is the master of bubbles, and the ability to apply ranged personal protection for someone diving the enemy team is such a good combo. Iron Fist is already hard to kill with, the amount of shields and health he gets. Imagine him also getting the protection from a Magneto bubble. Stuff of nightmares, right? Same stuff goes for the likes of Spider-Man, Magic, Black Panther, Wolverine, and to some extent, the Hulk. I say to some extent because I think the bubble is actually more useful to the Hulk and the other tanks for another reason. It makes the beefy boys even beefier. Characters like Groot and Penny can already deal good damage and take a punch, but now you can protect them while they're doing their good damage, and they can take even more punches because you bubbled them, just making a good thing even better. And we can't mention combos without mentioning his team up with Scarlet Witch, which legitimately raises him up a tier spot for me. For those unaware, his team up is Metallic Fusion. Scarlet Witch supercharges his sword with Chaos Energy. You basically hit the button and Magneto summons a sword, which he swings and sends out these slash projectiles. They deal 55 damage on hit with a spell field that actually does 30 damage, so 85 damage on a direct hit. These projectiles come out in a burst with a short interval in between, and he can fire them for up to 10 seconds before the ability goes on its 30-second cooldown. This ability is quite large and easy to hit, and it can 3 to 4 shot most DPS and supports if they're, not getting healing or not getting any defensive abilities. So needless to say, this is really, really good and brings Magneto's damage up to the next level. It makes your shield pushes more effective since you can melt anything in front of you along with the rest of your team, and since it moves relatively fast and has a larger hitbox, you can use it to hit flying targets fairly easily if they're closer to you. Obviously, if they're flying like 60-70 meters off, you're going to have a harder time, but if they're like mid-range, using his sword projectiles with the Metallic Fusion team-up, really easy way to get rid of the annoying Iron Men and Storms you might find in your lobbies. Overall, I think Magneto is quite a complex character that I feel like is easy to pick up since his kit is just so good, but really hard to master. Knowing when to use your shield, who and when to bubble, and when to just save your cooldowns can take some practice and time to get down. But I think once you do, Magneto is a great floor general style character capable of dealing good damage and protecting his team at longer ranges than most tanks. He's great for helping out diving comps and is a perfect secondary tank for backing up another, primary beefy boy. And I think that's going to be it for the video. I want to hear from you all. What do you think about Magneto? Is he your favorite tank? And how can I make these guides better, and who would you like to see me cover next? I don't know, so let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video or found it informative, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Marvel Rivals guides and other Marvel Rivals content. Also, don't forget to check the description or the pinned comment down below for a link to my community Discord channel and Twitch channel, where I'm trying to get community stuff like VOD reviews going and tournaments and stuff like that going. And on Twitch, obviously, you can watch me play live. I'm Zulu Leaks, and I'll see you in the next video.